Hi, my name is Jonathan, a 49-year-old civil engineer who spends his days designing bridges and overpasses for the State Department of Transportation, married for 22 years to Clara, with whom I share a quiet home in the suburbs and two grown children who've long since moved out to pursue their own lives. Our marriage, once filled with the easy companionship of young love, has settled into a rhythm of shared silences and separate routines, where emotional support feels like a distant memory, leaving me often feeling emotionally tired, as if carrying the weight of unspoken words alone. We have no grandchildren yet, just the echo of empty rooms and the faint hope that things might improve if we could just find a way to talk again. The sharp ring of my phone shattered the quiet hum of the evening, pulling me from the depths of my armchair where I'd been nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, the bitter steam curling up like forgotten promises in the dim glow of the living room lamp. It was Clara's voice on the other end, clipped and distant as always, informing me that she'd be late coming home from work because of an unexpected meeting with her colleague. But there was something off in her tone, a slight hesitation, like the catch of breath before a lie, that sent a cold ripple through my chest, disrupting the fragile normalcy I'd clung to all day. This initial disruption marks the onset of cognitive dissonance in Jonathan's psyche, with a familiar routine of marriage clashes with subtle cues of deceit. The first warning sign was already here, in the form of tonal hesitation, which triggers an instinctive emotional response, a cold ripple, indicating the erosion of trust. Psychologically, this reflects denial as a defense mechanism. Jonathan clings to fragile normalcy, rationalizing the anomaly to avoid the pain of potential betrayal. Interpersonally, it highlights how prolonged emotional tiredness from lack of support can heighten sensitivity to inconsistencies, fostering anxiety. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, as unaddressed suspicions fester, leading to deeper relational fractures. This event underscores the theme of trust as a fragile foundation, where small lies accumulate, pushing the individual toward internal conflict and eventual confrontation. Emotionally, it sets a tone of isolation, amplifying the husband's vulnerability in a partnership starved of open communication. I sat there after hanging up, staring at the faded floral pattern on the wallpaper we'd chosen together years ago, the scent of her lingering perfume, jasmine and vanilla, mixing with the musty odor of the old carpet, wondering why this simple delay felt like the first crack in a foundation I'd built my life upon. The house felt heavier in her absence, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway amplifying the emptiness, each second a reminder of how our conversations had dwindled to mere exchanges about bills and groceries. I'd come home early that day, my back aching from hours hunched over blueprints at the office, where the fluorescent lights buzzed like persistent doubts, and the chatter of younger engineers reminded me of my own fading ambitions. I moved to the kitchen, the cool tile under my socks grounding me as I rummaged through the fridge, pulling out leftovers from last night's chicken stir-fry, the faint garlic aroma stirring a vague hunger that did little to fill the emotional void. Clara had been distant and guarded for months now, her eyes averting mine during meals, her responses to my questions about her day at the hospital administration job coming in short, evasive bursts, as if sharing details might expose some hidden fragility. As I heated the food in the microwave, its low hum filling the space, I recalled our morning routine, her slipping out of bed before dawn, the mattress barely dipping as she rose, her silhouette in the half-light of the bathroom door casting long shadows that seemed to stretch further each day. She'd kiss my forehead lightly, her lips cool and perfunctory before heading out, leaving behind the faint click of the front door and the emptiness that followed. Tonight, though, as the clock edged past 8, I found myself pacing the living room, the soft creak of the floorboards under my weight echoing my growing unease. Why avoid conversations lately? Last week, when I'd asked about her weekend plans, she'd mumbled something about errands, her fingers twisting the hem of her blouse, a gesture I'd seen only when she was nervous about audits at work. Or so I told myself. The phone buzzed again, a text from her, stuck in traffic after meeting. Home soon. But the words felt hollow, and I noticed the timestamp, later than her usual commute allowed. I sat at the dining table, the wooden surface scarred from years of family meals, tracing the grooves with my finger, my mind wandering to our early days, when laughter filled these rooms and emotional support was as natural as breathing. Now, the lack of it weighed on me, leaving me tired like a bridge bearing too much load without reinforcement. Outside, the street lights flickered on, casting orange hues through the curtains, and I heard the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, a sound that usually comforted but tonight amplified my isolation. Was it just fatigue from my job, or something more? I pushed the thought away, convincing myself it was nothing. But as the hours ticked by without her return, a subtle tension coiled in my gut, like the first tremor before a structural collapse, leaving me with a nagging question. What if this delay was the sign of something unraveling? The next morning dawned with a muted gray light filtering through the bedroom blinds, the chill of early autumn seeping into the sheets where Clara lay beside me. Her breathing steady, but her body turned away, as if even in sleep she guarded some invisible boundary between us. I watched her for a moment, the rise and fall of her shoulder under the quilt we'd bought on our honeymoon, its faded blue pattern a relic of warmer times, and felt the emotional tiredness settle deeper, like sediment in a neglected riverbed. She stirred, her hand brushing mine accidentally, but she pulled back quickly, her fingers curling into a fist, a small gesture that ignited the first spark of real suspicion. Why this avoidance, this reluctance to connect, when once her touch had been my anchor? Over breakfast, the kitchen filled with the sizzle of eggs in the pan and the rich, oily scent of bacon, I tried to bridge the gap, asking about her late night. The meeting ran long, she said, her voice even but her eyes fixed on her coffee mug, the steam rising in lazy spirals that obscured her expression. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words, as she stirred her spoon slowly, the clink against porcelain echoing in the quiet room. I noticed her phone on the counter, vibrating softly with a notification, and she glanced at it furtively, her lips pressing into a thin line before she silenced it, her movements precise but tense, like someone hiding a fragile secret. Here, Jonathan's observation of Clara's furtive behavior exemplifies the buildup of suspicion through nonverbal cues, a classic indicator of interpersonal deception. The tense movements and evasive glances reveal her guarded personality, which psychologically serves as a barrier to intimacy, exacerbating the core marital issue of emotional unavailability. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase, as Jonathan initially does, employing justification to preserve the illusion of stability. This denial phase prolongs emotional distress, manifesting in physical symptoms like a quickened heart, illustrating how betrayal suspicions activate the body's stress response. Thematically, it explores trust fragility, where everyday objects like a phone become symbols of hidden worlds. Interpersonally, such secrecy erodes mutual vulnerability, turning routine interactions into sources of frustration and fear. As suspicion grows, it shifts power dynamics, compelling Jonathan toward proactive investigation, a step that, while risky, signals emerging self-awareness and the rejection of passive acceptance in favor of truth-seeking. "Just work," she added, but the words hung in the air, unconvincing, and I felt my heart quicken, a subtle rhythm of doubt pulsing through me. That afternoon at work, surrounded by the hum of computers and the sharp smell of printer ink in the open-plan office, my mind wandered back to her. Colleagues chatted about weekend plans, their laughter a stark contrast to my inner turmoil, where hope wrestled with worry. I recalled how lately she'd been taking longer lunches, coming home with a faint trace of unfamiliar cologne on her clothes, musky and sharp, not the citrus one she preferred, dismissing it as hospital scents when I'd mentioned it once, her laugh forced, her hand waving dismissively in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Frustration built as I drafted a bridge schematic, my pencil scratching against paper, each line a metaphor for the connections we were losing. By evening, as I drove home through rush hour traffic, the honks of cars and the metallic tang of exhaust filling the air, suspicion gnawed at me. Clara announced over dinner roast beef with potatoes, the savory juices pooling on the plate. That she was going out with her friend Fiona for a girls' night, something about a wine-tasting event downtown. Her tone was casual, but she avoided my gaze, focusing instead on cutting her food with deliberate strokes, her knife scraping the plate in rhythmic tension. "It's been ages since I've seen her," she said, but there was a guarded edge to her words, and when her phone buzzed again, she flipped it face down quickly, her cheeks flushing slightly under the warm kitchen light. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, anger flickered. Why this secrecy, this evasion of simple conversations that once flowed freely? Later, alone in the study, the leather chair creaking under my weight and the desk lamp casting long shadows across scattered papers, I try to rationalize it. Maybe it was stress from her job, the endless paperwork and demanding hours leaving her distant. But as the clock struck 10 and she still wasn't home, the house silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator, my mind raced with images. Her laughing with someone else, her hand on another's arm. My pulse throbbed in my temples, a mix of fear and frustration, and I almost picked up the phone to call, but stopped, my fingers hovering, trembling slightly in the cool air. Was this the beginning of something irreversible, or just my imagination bridging gaps that weren't there? The night stretched on, leaving me in a limbo of growing distrust, each passing minute amplifying the emotional chasm between us. The following days unfolded like a slow, unraveling thread, each one pulling at the fabric of our marriage. As I began to observe Clara more closely, my emotionally tired state sharpening into a vigilant awareness that made every interaction feel like a clue in a puzzle I dreaded solving. In the mornings, as the sun slanted through the kitchen windows, painting golden streaks on the countertop cluttered with coffee grounds and half-eaten toast, I'd watch her prepare for work, her movements efficient but laced with an undercurrent of haste, slipping her phone into her purse with a quick glance over her shoulder, as if expecting scrutiny. The air carried the fresh scent of her shampoo, mingled with the earthy aroma of brewing coffee, but beneath it lingered that unfamiliar cologne again, faint yet persistent, stirring a moral dilemma within me. Should I invade her privacy, or let trust erode further? At work, amid the clatter of keyboards and the sterile smell of air conditioning in the conference room, I found myself distracted, my thoughts drifting to ways to confirm my suspicions without confrontation. That evening, as rain pattered against the windows, turning the world outside into a blurred watercolor of streetlights and wet pavement, I waited until Clara was in the shower, the water running in a steady rush, steam fogging the bathroom mirror, to approach her purse on the hall table. My heart pounded, a heavy thump echoing in my ears, as I unzipped it slowly, the zipper's teeth parting with a soft rasp that seemed deafening in the quiet house. Inside, amid lipsticks and keys, her phone lay dormant, its screen dark but tempting, and with trembling hands, cold despite the room's warmth. I powered it on, the dim glow illuminating my face like a conspirator's lantern. Notifications flickered to life, but the lock screen demanded a passcode, one I'd never known, and frustration welled up, hot and bitter, as I tried our anniversary date, her birthday, failing each time with a vibrating denial. I set it down, breathing deeply, the scent of her lavender lotion on the nearby shelf calming yet mocking me, and retreated to the living room, where the couch cushions sank under my weight, enveloping me in familiar comfort that now felt confining. Setbacks like this fueled my determination, though doubt gnawed. Was I becoming paranoid, seeing shadows where none existed? The next day brought a red herring. A colleague mentioned seeing Clara at a cafe with a man, but it turned out to be her brother, visiting unexpectedly, his jovial call later confirming it. Yet the initial spike of adrenaline left me shaken, my palms sweaty against the steering wheel on the drive home. Undeterred, I began noting inconsistencies. Her stories about late nights at work clashing with hospital schedules I casually checked online during lunch breaks, the screen's blue light straining my eyes in the dim office. One night, as thunder rumbled outside and lightning flashed, casting erratic shadows across the bedroom walls, I heard her phone buzz under her pillow while she slept. Slipping out of bed, the floor cool and creaky under my bare feet, I retrieved it, this time guessing the code, our daughter's birth year, and unlocked a trove of messages. Texts from an unknown number, affectionate and intimate, arranged meetings that aligned with her outings, but nothing explicit enough to condemn outright, leaving me in a limbo of pain and uncertainty, my breath catching in shallow gasps. I scrolled, the phone's warmth burning my skin. This discovery represents a pivotal moral and emotional dilemma, where Jonathan invades privacy to confirm suspicions, highlighting the psychological toll of betrayal evidence gathering. The limbo of pain captures ambiguous grief, a state where partial proof intensifies denial while fueling anger, creating cognitive dissonance that manifests physically in shallow breaths and tactile discomfort. Thematically, it addresses consequences of betrayal, as incomplete evidence prolongs suffering, forcing the individual to weigh trust against self-protection. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, opting for more proof rather than confrontation, which delays healing. Interpersonally, this act shifts Jonathan from victim to agent, but the cost of guilt, underscoring how emotional neglect in marriage can drive one partner to external validation, perpetuating cycles of guardedness. Psychologically, it fosters growth through adversity. As the cliffhanger, discovery builds resilience, transforming vague anxiety into determined clarity, though it risks escalating relational conflict if not handled with composure. The moral weight pressed on me, guilt mixing with anger, but as I replaced the phone, Clara stirred, her eyes fluttering open briefly, a guarded look crossing her face before she turned away. That cliffhanger discovery, a name, Alex, recurring in the threads, propelled me forward, my resolve hardening amid the storm's fading rumble, knowing I needed more to face the truth without shattering completely. The undeniable proof came on a crisp Saturday evening, as autumn leaves rustled outside under a fading twilight sky, their earthy decay scent wafting through the cracked window while I sat in the dim living room, the leather armchair enveloping me like a reluctant witness to the unraveling. Clara had announced another outing with Fiona, her voice steady but her hands fidgeting with her earrings, small gold hoops that caught the lamp's warm light. As she stood in the hallway, her coat draped over her arm, exuding a guarded poise that now screamed deception. I nodded, my throat tight, but as she left with a perfunctory peck on my cheek, her lips cool, her jasmine perfume overpowering, I felt a surge of determination, slipping out minutes later to follow her car through the suburban streets. The engine's hum blending with my racing heartbeat, headlights piercing the gathering dusk like accusatory beams. She parked at a quiet bistro downtown, the neon sign flickering in red and blue hues against the rain-slicked pavement, and I watched from across the street, hidden in shadows cast by a towering oak, its branches creaking in the wind. There, through the fog window, she met not Fiona, but a man, tall with salt and pepper hair, his smile easy as he embraced her, their bodies close in a way that twisted a knife in my gut. The scene unfolded in slow motion. Her laugh, genuine and light, her hand on his arm, lingering, his whisper in her ear, her nod, eyes sparkling under the candlelight that danced like mocking flames. Pain crashed over me, hot and visceral, my fists clenching in my pockets, nails digging into palms as I fought the urge to storm in, the cold air biting my face, amplifying the internal storm of betrayal. Back home, the house silent except for the drip of a leaky faucet in the kitchen. I paced the floorboards, each step a thunderous echo in my mind, building to confrontation. When she returned hours later, the door clicking shut softly, her cheeks flushed from the chill, or perhaps guilt, she found me waiting at the dining table, the overhead light casting harsh shadows on my face. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and steady, though inside rage simmered, bubbling like the tea kettle I'd forgotten on the stove. She froze, her coat slipping from her arm to the floor with a soft thud, her eyes widening in a mix of fear and defiance, her lips parting but no words emerging at first. "Who is Alex?" I asked, the name hanging in the air like a guillotine, and she paled, her hands trembling as she gripped the chair back, knuckles whitening. "It's not what you think," she stammered, but her voice cracked, pauses stretching between words, her gaze darting to the window where rain now pelted the glass in rhythmic accusation. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as she sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping, the guarded facade crumbling. "I've been seeing him for months," she confessed finally, her words tumbling out in a rush, laced with sobs that shook her frame, admitting the emotional void in our marriage had driven her to seek support elsewhere. But her excuses rang hollow, gaslighting attempts that only fueled my disappointment. The confrontation and confession crystallized the emotional climax, exposing the raw consequences of betrayal on both parties. Clara's gaslighting, shifting blame to the marital void, illustrates defensive mechanisms rooted in guilt and fear, while Jonathan's disappointment reflects shattered illusions of loyalty. Psychologically, this event triggers acute grief stages: shock, anger, and bargaining, evident in emotional swings that test self-control. Thematically, it emphasizes trust's irreversible breach, where excuses amplify pain, revealing how distant personalities mask deeper insecurities. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase, but here Jonathan recognizes the hollowness, fostering interpersonal boundaries. Emotionally, the sobs and pauses heighten tension, allowing catharsis through verbal release, yet they underscore power imbalances in guarded relationships. This key moment catalyzes personal growth, as Jonathan's composure signals empowerment, moving from denial to acceptance, though it leaves scars of isolation that demand reflection for true healing. The room felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken years of neglect, and as she reached for my hand, I pulled back, the touch burning like betrayal. An unexpected twist emerged. She revealed Alex was a colleague. Their affair sparked during a conference I'd encouraged her to attend, thinking it would reignite her passion for work. Shock gave way to resolve. I stood, my chair scraping back with a sharp screech, composing myself amid the emotional swings, rage ebbing to profound sadness. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice breaking slightly, but I held her gaze, watching her panic manifest in rapid breaths and averted eyes, the climax leaving us both exposed, shattered illusions littering the space between us like broken glass. In the days following the confrontation, the house transformed into a battlefield of quiet tensions, where every object, the shared coffee mugs on the shelf, their chipped edges from careless handling, the family photos on the mantel, smiles frozen in happier times, served as reminders of the fracture, the air heavy with the scent of stale regret and unspoken accusations. Clara's reactions oscillated between tearful apologies and defensive silences, her distant nature now amplified into withdrawal, retreating to the guest room where the bed creaked under her restless turns at night, audible through the thin walls. I navigated the emotional minefield with a heavy heart, the lack of support in our marriage now glaringly evident, leaving me to process the pain alone, my inner conflicts raging like a storm, anger at her betrayal clashing with self-doubt, wondering if my emotional tiredness had contributed to the drift. Family impacts rippled outward. Our children, informed over strained phone calls, their voices tinny through the speaker, laced with shock and concern, offered support, but the distance made it feel abstract, like echoes in an empty hall. Legal considerations loomed. I consulted a lawyer discreetly, the office smelling of polished wood and old books, discussing division of assets, my pen hovering over forms that symbolized the end, a moral dilemma twisting in my gut. Forgive or forge ahead. Small setbacks tested me, like finding a forgotten love note in her drawer while packing her things. The paper crinkled and ink-smudged, reigniting fury, but victories emerged too. Reclaiming the study as my space, rearranging books with deliberate movements, the dust motes dancing and sunlight filtering through the blinds, bringing a tentative clarity. One evening, as twilight bathed the kitchen in soft purple hues and the aroma of my solitary meal. Pasta with herbs, steam rising comfortingly, filled the air. Clara approached, her footsteps hesitant on the tile, her face drawn and eyes red-rimmed. "Can we try again?" she asked, her voice small, but I shook my head, feeling muscles relax for the first time in weeks, a lightness settling in my chest. "No," I replied, the word powerful in its simplicity, emphasizing my decision to let go, refusing to be anchored by her manipulations. Jonathan's decisive rejection marks a turning point toward autonomy, psychologically embodying the shift from victimhood to empowerment amid betrayal's aftermath. This quiet assertion counters Clara's manipulations, highlighting themes of personal growth through boundary setting, where emotional tiredness evolves into clarity and relief. Interpersonally, it disrupts codependent patterns, forcing acknowledgement of mutual neglect's consequences, such as relational dissolution. Many people choose to remain silent at this point, and in vain, fearing change. But Jonathan's choice reflects resilience, transforming pain into self-respect. Thematically, it explores freedom's physical sensations, relaxing muscles, lightness, as metaphors for shedding emotional burdens. Emotionally, this decision mitigates ongoing distress, promoting confidence and new habits, though inner conflicts like bitterness linger, requiring ongoing reflection. Ultimately, it illustrates how betrayal, while devastating, can catalyze profound self-discovery, redefining identity beyond the marriage's confines. She nodded, a quiet sigh escaping her lips, and left the room, the door closing with a soft click that symbolized closure. Through it all, relief began to seep in, like the first breath after surfacing from deep water, my confidence growing amid the chaos. I established boundaries, separate finances, her moving to a friend's temporarily, the logistics unfolding with controlled tension. Internal reflections deepened, acknowledging the core problem of emotional neglect, vowing not to repeat it. And as I walked the neighborhood paths, leaves crunching underfoot and cool air filling my lungs, I felt the weight lift, preparing for resolution with a sense of emerging freedom. With the divorce papers signed in a sterile attorney's office, the ink drying under the hum of fluorescent lights, and the faint scent of fresh coffee from a nearby pot, our 22-year marriage dissolved quietly, leaving me in a home now echoing with solitude, but also possibility, the boundaries firmly established like new guardrails on a rebuilt bridge. I embraced independence gradually, adopting habits that nourished my spirit. Morning runs along the fog-shrouded paths, the crisp air invigorating my lungs, dew-kissed grass brushing my ankles. Evenings with books or old friends, laughter filling the living room where silence once reigned, the warmth of a fire crackling in the hearth chasing away shadows. New acquaintances emerged, a hobby group for woodworking, the smell of sawdust and varnish grounding me as I shaped raw lumber into something purposeful, symbolizing my own reconstruction. Freedom manifested in small joys, brewing coffee just for myself, the rich aroma enveloping the kitchen without the weight of expectation, walking barefoot on the cool hardwood floors, feeling the texture under my soles as if rediscovering the space. Confidence bloomed, unmarred by Clara's guarded distance, and though bitterness lingered like a faint aftertaste, it faded into wisdom. Understanding that betrayal stemmed from our mutual neglect, the lack of emotional support a shared failing, but one I could now address alone. Reflections came in quiet moments. Sitting on the porch at dawn, the sun rising in hues of pink and gold, birdsong piercing the stillness, I pondered lessons learned. The importance of open communication, the empowerment in choosing self-respect over clinging to a hollow union. The catharsis arrived subtly, a sense of closure washing over me like a gentle wave, leaving calm in its wake. No dramatic triumphs, just quiet acceptance, the emotional tiredness replaced by a steady strength, a slight hope flickering for what lay ahead. Perhaps new connections, built on honesty. In this new life, I found satisfaction in my own company, the world brighter, air fresher, and myself wiser, ready to move forward unburdened. This reflective closure signifies the culmination of personal transformation, where Jonathan integrates betrayal's lessons into a renewed sense of self. Psychologically, it demonstrates post-traumatic growth, turning emotional voids into opportunities for independence and wisdom. Thematically, it underscores consequences of betrayal as catalysts for empowerment, with sensory details, brighter world, fresher air, symbolizing liberation from guarded dynamics. Interpersonally, establishing boundaries post-divorce fosters healthier connections, free from manipulation. A typical mistake is to think that this is just a phase, but here acceptance replaces denial, yielding catharsis and hope. Emotionally, the calm supplants tiredness, illustrating resilience's rewards through small joys and habits. This event concludes the narrative arc, affirming that trust's loss, while painful, paves paths to authenticity and strength. Overall, the story portrays a nuanced journey from subtle distrust to empowered resolution, emphasizing psychological themes like denial's pitfalls and betrayal's transformative potential. Key events reveal how emotional neglect erodes trust, leading to denial as a shield, but ultimately fostering growth through confrontation and release. Interpersonal dynamics highlight guardedness as a barrier to intimacy, with consequences manifesting in isolation and eventual separation. Jonathan's arc exemplifies resilience, evolving from tiredness to wisdom, offering catharsis via quiet acceptance. Lessons underscore the value of early communication to prevent escalation and the empowerment in choosing self over illusion, leaving readers with insights on navigating relational betrayals toward personal freedom and emotional maturity.